people until these policies bear fruit. Shin Se-min has the latest from the Blue House.
President Moon Jae-in, for the first time, has introduced coming up with measures to complement some of the economic policies the government has introduced this year. Chairing the extended ministerial meeting on the economy in another first, it was a show of determination that his administration will be zeroing in on the economy next year. And to spur on the slowing economy, he said the government might slow down the pace at which it's raising the minimum wage, given the backlash from small businesses and the self-employed.
최저임금 인상, 노동시간 단축과 같은 새로운 경제 정책은 경제 사회의 수용성과 이해관계자의 입장을 조화롭게 고려해 국민의 공감 속에서 추진하는 것이 무엇보다 중요합니다. 필요한 경우 보완 조치도 함께 강구해야 할 것입니다.
He said the same goes for other key economic policies, ordering his officials to be cautious when it comes to the policy's possible adverse repercussions. The idea of slowing down the wage hike is in tune with what Finance Minister Hong Nam-gi said when he told lawmakers that in the new year he will take into account the acceptability of a wage hike to the market. Employers have complained that they can't afford the new wages, which have gone up some 11% this year alone. They say they have had to lay people off to make ends meet. President Moon also said the government should aggressively get rid of obstacles to corporate investment because weak investment has added downward pressure on the economy already grappling with slowing exports. And looking at the administration's core economic initiative of inclusive growth, the president is standing firm. He called for patience and trust until the policies show results. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
In a briefing held on Monday concerning the government's economic plans for next year, the Minister of Economy and Finance, Hong Nam-gi, said the Korean economy and the global economy are at a turning point, where wealth polarization is worsening as growth stagnates. Hong said this is why the Korean government's emphasis on inclusive growth is crucial in order to change the country's economic paradigm as it faces growing external risks, including trade protectionism, which are expected to continue affecting Korea's exports. Even though household income and domestic consumption have risen, he said there's still work to be done when it comes to economic indicators in employment and income distribution. And he said the government's plans are focused on these issues. South Korea's political parties have agreed to hold a plenary session next Thursday to vote on pending bills. The agreement was reached between the floor leaders of the three main parties who met to discuss the specific agenda for the December extraordinary session that kicked off today. During the session, the parties agreed to review bills related to raising transparency and rooting out accounting fraud at private kindergartens. They'll also form a special committee to hold a parliamentary probe into hiring irregularities in the public sector and consider measures to cushion the side effects of a minimum wage hike coming up next month. Another big issue is deciding how to reform the country's electoral system. The smaller parties want to expand proportional representation, where the number of seats they get is in proportion to the percentage of the vote they get nationwide. Right now, South Koreans get one vote for a representative for their district and another vote for a party. In the 300-member National Assembly, 253 seats are single-member districts and 47 members are chosen by proportional representation. 28 South Korean officials and experts who've been in North Korea for an on-site survey of the northeastern Donghae rail line returned home today. Since December 8th, they've been checking the section between the North's Kumgangsan Mountain and Tumangang River, moving by bus and train with their North Korean counterparts. And this completes the two Koreas' joint inspections of railways. They also took a look at the western Gyeonggi rail line 2 weeks ago and cross-border sections back in July. Seoul and Pyongyang will hold a groundbreaking ceremony next week to mark the start of connecting and modernizing roads and railways between each other. But actual construction will start later in accordance with the North's denuclearization and waivers on sanctions. Former North Korean leader Kim Jong-il died 7 years ago today, and the regime, including leader Kim Jong-un, has been paying tribute to him. The North Korean Central News Agency reported Monday that Kim Jong-un visited the Kumsusan Palace of the Sun to commemorate the death of his father. This was his first public appearance in 2 weeks since he last visited a shoe factory in Wonsan. The regime's state-run daily, the Nodong Shinmun, has posted a number of stories about Kim Jong-il since Sunday, highlighting his achievements in economic development and improving people's livelihoods rather than his military achievements. In other news, a local think tank has downgraded its growth projection for the South Korean economy in 2019. Some of the reasons, it says, are the slowing global economy and sluggish domestic demand. Ko Jun-hee reports.
The Hyundai Research Institute has cut South Korea's growth forecast for 2019 to 2.5%. This is down from the previous forecast of 2.6% announced in September. It's the lowest projection yet among other major organizations, including the OECD's outlook of 2.8% and the Bank of Korea's 2.7%. According to the Institute's report released on Sunday, the main reasons for the downgraded outlook were the global economic slowdown and fears over low domestic demand. The global economic slowdown will affect the increased rate of South Korean exports. Outbound shipments are likely to increase by 3.7% in 2019, sharply down from this year's estimate of 6.2%. One reason is a trade war between the U.S. and China. Although the leaders of the world's biggest economies reached a deal to temporarily keep their countries' trade tensions from escalating earlier this month, there are still risks because U.S. tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods can go up after 90 days. Either way, the trade war can negatively affect South Korea as well because many local companies rely on exports to China and the U.S. Another reason is that the global semiconductor market is losing steam. According to data from World Semiconductor Trade Statistics in November, the growth rate of the global semiconductor market will mark 2.6% next year, far lower than this year's estimate of almost 16%. The Institute also pointed to reasons closer to home. Private consumption is expected to increase by 2.4% next year, down from this year's estimate of 2.7%. This is mainly due to low consumer sentiment coming from a decrease in newly added jobs and an increase in the unemployment rate. Facilities investment, on the other hand, is expected to edge up 0.4%, up from this year's estimate of negative growth due to the government's push for innovative growth. Ko Jun-hee, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
North Korea has condemned the United States for stepping up sanctions and pressure on the regime. It warned that there may be a return to, quote, exchange of fire from last year, and the denuclearization process could also be dead in the water. Lee Seung-jae has more.
Efforts to denuclearize North Korea have made little progress since the historic summit between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump in June, where both sides agreed to work on denuclearizing the Korean peninsula. That goal may have hit another snag as Pyongyang issued a fresh warning on Sunday. It said if Washington continues to escalate its sanctions and human rights campaign against the North, the approach could permanently end any chance of denuclearizing the regime. The statement by North Korea's foreign ministry was carried by the regime's official Korean Central News Agency. The ministry said that if the U.S. believes North Korea would give up its nuclear weapons by increasing sanctions and their human rights racket to an unprecedented level, it would be the, quote, greatest miscalculation. It added such moves will block the path to denuclearization on the Korean peninsula forever, a result desired by no one. The ministry's statement was released under the name of the Policy Research Director of the Institute for American Studies. The warning came after the U.S. sanctioned 3 North Korean officials last week, including Choi Ryong-hae, a top aide to Kim Jong-un. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
For more on that, we have joining us today Dr. Bong Young-sik from the Hyundai Institute for North Korean Studies. It's good to have you back on the show.
Very pleased to be here.
As we just heard in that report, Pyongyang has not reacted kindly to Washington's latest sanctions. They released a statement condemning Washington's latest actions and even saying that it could block the path to denuclearization forever. I think it's that word forever which is catching people's eyes. I mean, what do you make of this statement?
North Korean leadership is basically telling the United States that it is not time or place for the United States to put one more agenda on the table when negotiations on denuclearization of North Korea and building trust and diplomatic normalization between the two countries have been stalemated. So you have to do first things first. That is basically the gist of the message delivered by North Korean authority. But at the same time, the human rights abuses inside North Korea is something that is going to emerge anyway, something that North Korea cannot escape from. Because at the end of this international society's engagement with North Korea and its assistance to bring North Korea to the state of a normal state with prosperity, not just weapons of mass destruction, will require massive financial assistance to shore up, dilapidated North Korean economy. In that context, Japan's role is paramount because without normalization with Japan, DPRK, North Korea cannot really expect to get the seed money to start off its national economy and industrialization. The closest analogy is the 1965 normalization treaty between South Korea and Japan, in which Japan provided $800 million in many different forms of economic grant and restitution for the colonial past. So think about the figure that North Korea would demand Japan pay in restitution in case of normalization treaty is going to be signed between the two countries. But without trust between North Korea and Japan, then Japanese society will not allow its government to agree upon normalization treaty with North Korea. The outstanding issue is the abduction issue of Japanese citizens. So without resolution of that critical issue lying between the two countries, then there wouldn't be any normalization treaty between Japan and North Korea. Thereby, North Korea cannot expect to have the massive financial assistance and compensation from Japan that are essential for rapid and early industrialization of North Korean economy. So even for North Korea's future survival and prosperity, dealing with human rights issues with all the surrounding countries is something that North Korean leadership has to face, whether it likes or not.
So you've touched upon a lot of issues there, but let me go back to the actual statement that was released by Pyongyang. I mean, it's not the first time we've heard these kind of condemning statements of the US, and it probably won't be the last time. I'm sure we'll see many more of these. So the question becomes, how seriously should we take these kind of messages and threats that are carried in the North Korean state media?
Of course, we have to take every statement issued by any authority of the North Korean government, even some organizations outside the official channel of North Korean government as seriously as they deserve to be. But it is very interesting that the statement was issued by the Policy Research Director of the Institute for American Studies at North Korea's Foreign Ministry, whose name is still unbeknownst. Anybody.
Yeah, of course, yes. The statement didn't come with a name, just with the
in
position.
front of camera, I can only tell you that it's not me, right? But
right.
Other than that, we have no idea that who actually is responsible for this statement. But at the same time, North Korea wants to maintain this kind of tactical ambiguity, saying that it is not really an outright threat that we will scrap our agreement with the United States and possibly resume in the early part of 2019 with a new test of intercontinental ballistic missiles or seventh nuclear test. We wouldn't go that far, but you should not rule out that possibility. Because North Korea does not want to abandon its strategic benefit. North Koreans are not that stupid to abandon the current situation that favor North Korea, which makes it very difficult, if not impossible, for the Trump administration to turn to any type of military operations in the name of maximum pressure on North Korea. Because unless North Korea is going to first break out of the Singapore summit meeting and conduct any type of missile or nuclear test or armed conflict with South Korea or Japan, then it is almost impossible for Trump administration to justify turn the ball to the Pentagon, not the State Department, in favor of taking military operations. So I don't think North Korean leadership is ready to cross the line yet.
To me, it also seems that the US has have a similar take on this as well, because an official from the US State Department responded to the statement after questions from a different media organization saying that they are confident Kim Jong-un will stick to his promise to denuclearize, and that's pretty much all they said to it. It seems to me that they're officially just shrugging it off, and they don't take this kind of statement seriously. Do you see it that way as well? Do you think the US will be fazed at all by this kind of statement?
I think it's a shrugging off the statement by a North Korean authority, which is not clear who is actually responsible for or who is actually behind this statement, or how serious North Korean authority actually is to actually carry out the so-called ambiguous threat of resumption of missile and nuclear tests. So United States seems to respond to very ambiguous action and words by North Korean authority in the same way, just shrugging off and maintain very ambiguous position that, well, if you have to stick to your promises that you made in the Singapore summit meeting. And the underlying assumption is that time favors the United States, because as long as economic sanctions remain in place.
It seems like pressure on North Korea looks like it will continue for a little bit while further, because the UN is set to pass another resolution for the 14th year in a row condemning North Korea's human rights abuses. Do you think there'll be more kind of statements condemning these the UN and US actions from Pyongyang again?
I think so, because North Korean authority, even before the inauguration of the current regime, Kim Jong-un regime, during his father's time, Kim Jong-il, expressed a great deal of sensitivity and resentment to international community's call for improvement of human rights situation inside North Korea, that there is no room for infringement of the sovereign independence of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea in the name of human rights. So I think the similar line of reasoning will prevail for this current regime under the leader of Kim Jong-un.
So yes, more cycle of objections and US pressure. But there's that side, then there's the other side of actually US President Trump. Now, he tweeted on Friday about North Korea, and the tweet, if I'll read it in full because it's not very long, many people have asked how we are doing in our negotiations with North Korea. I always reply by saying we are in no hurry. There is a wonderful potential for great economic success for that country. Kim Jong-un sees it better than anyone and will fully take advantage of it for his people. We are doing just fine. Now, what do you make of that kind of statement coming from Trump, and then previously the US State Department issuing sanctions, etc.?
It'll be very difficult for Trump administration to admit that since the Singapore summit meeting on June 12th, things have not been going well. It has maintained that it was a right decision by Washington to have the first ever summit meeting with the leadership of the adversary country, which is North Korea, for the sake of giving a chance to top-down approach to the potential settlement of the nuclear missile issues with North Korea. So it is politically rational for Trump administration to emphasize all the positives, not negatives. For instance, since beginning of 2018, this year, United States has been safe from verbal threats of military actions by North Korea to any part of the mainland of the United States. North Korea has not conducted any more missile or nuclear tests, which can be regarded as a huge achievement by the Trump administration. So it is only natural of Trump administration to emphasize those positive elements. And as I said, that Trump administration's, well, no pun intended, Trump card is that as long as economic sanctions on North Korea then there's nothing that for the United States to hurry, because it is North Korea that is bleeding. It is not the United States that is not bleeding, as long as North Korea's nuclear missile threats have not been increased.
Do you think this shows, at least, that despite these statements from North Korea and despite US issuing new sanctions, that ultimately it's Trump and ultimately it's Kim Jong-un who are the real people who can make the big decisions here, and that as long as Trump is on positive message and Kim Jong-un stays on a positive message, that there is still hope for things to go smoothly and not go back to the previous paradigm that he had with fire and fury and threats and threat of nuclear war?
Well, I wouldn't be that optimistic and positive when it comes to this combination of leaderships. But at the same time, there are reasons to be hopeful that President Trump's emphasis on the effectiveness of economic sanctions on North Korean behavior is true, because of two reasons. One, given the nature of the Kim Jong-un leadership, the economic sanctions may hurt North Korean economy and the leadership more than ever. Because compared to his grandfather and father, Kim Jong-un was educated and spent a lot of time in his youth in the Western world, in Switzerland. So he's very familiar with a very prosperous and advanced lifestyle and living conditions. So he wouldn't want to be the leader of one of the more poorest countries and backward countries in the world. I guess it is genuine for him to be the king of the prosperous North Korea. So there's a reason that Kim Jong-un leadership may not be so patient and impervious to the pressure of economic sanctions compared to the previous two North Korean leaderships, his grandfathers and his fathers. Second thing is that North Korean population and economy has been fundamentally transformed since the days of the arduous march, the food crisis in late 1990s. After the food crisis in 1990s, the central government of North Korea abandoned the food distribution system and allowed the local and black markets. So basically, North Korean populations these days are independent from the state support. And economic sanctions actually strangle their lifelines, because the North Korean economy has grown in ways to become extremely dependent upon unofficial trade with the outside world, namely China. So when the trade with China has been shrunk because of economic sanctions, the very livelihood of almost all members of the North Korean society have been hit so hard by economic sanctions. So I'm not suggesting that there's a civil society in North Korea ready to revolt against the regime because of economic hardship, but at least North Korean populations who are born with and grew familiar with basic market system have growing resentment and disappointment toward the Kim Jong-un leadership. So economic sanctions are hurting both leadership and the population at the same time compared to North Korea in the past.
Interesting. I want to get one more question in before we go, very briefly. So North Korean state media has shown Kim Jong-un attending a ceremony for his, the 7th anniversary of his father's death, Kim Jong-il. And this was quite a muted affair. But what's interesting, though, he hasn't been seen for about 2 weeks before this. And then before that, he was also missing for about a couple of weeks from North Korean state media. Why do you think there is such little activity going on with Kim Jong-un right now?
My analysis is that his absence was meant to maximize its leverage upon Moon Jae-in government, who had desperately sought to realize Kim Jong-un's visit to Seoul before the end of this year in the backhill of the Pyongyang Declaration on September 19th. So disappearing from the public scene has enforced North Korea's leverage upon South Korea with regard to the potential summit meeting in Seoul before the end of the year. And second reason that he must be really stressed out to decide what will be contained in the content of the New Year's message of the 2019, which is only, less than 3 weeks away? So you must, as a reporter, you must understand the amount of stress that Kim Jong-un has to deal with, try to meet the deadline, right? For a very important speech. So I guess these two reasons account for his absence in December.
Well, that'll be January 1st, 12 p.m. Korea time, I believe, and we'll keep a close eye watch on that, and I'll definitely be working on New Year's Day as well. Anyway, it's good to have you here with us as always.
Thank you.
And that is where we will bring our show to a close. I'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth discussion of the day's top stories. Thank you for watching, and hope you can join us again next time. Goodbye.